Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our webinar this morning.
Hi, Yael, you're on.
Yael, you're on mute.
Me.
I think it automatically muted everyone. I'm not sure how that happened, but
Yeah.
you're better off start again.
It's fine. I don't think I've said anything too helpful so far. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I think we might be expecting some more people, but we're going to make a start now with some intros and get going with the webinar this morning. My name is Yael. I work on the employment team here at Work Avenue, joined today by my colleagues Richard and Melissa. Some of you very familiar faces to me, so nice to see you again, a few new faces as well, so welcome to everybody. Just to tell you sort of a little bit about me and how I sort of fit into this webinar today. So I have been at Work Avenue for just over 10 years now. My main role here is I look after the jobs board and speak to all of the employers who advertise their vacancies with us and recommend our clients where possible to those jobs. So I have a lot of discussions with employers all the time about what they look for in applications, including cover letters as well. So I think I'm going to be talking from that angle and also from the angle of advising our clients who are looking for work as well. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to just hand over to Richard to introduce himself now.
Hi everyone, my name's Richard. I'm an employment careers advisor at Work Avenue. I've been at Work Avenue for about 4.5 years now. Probably been doing the work of a careers advisor probably eight and a half years in total. And yeah, I spend a lot of my life talking to clients about CVs and cover letters. So very, very happy to join everyone here today on the workshop, and I hope I can, along with Yael, add some good value for you all.
Great, thanks, Richard. And Melissa is also here. Melissa works with me on job placements. I'm sure some of you have either spoken to her on the phone or via email. So you have a chance now to put a face to the name. Melissa, do you want to say hello to everyone?
The face behind the email and the call. I'm just here basically to help field any questions that you guys have. So feel free to drop in the chat if you've got any questions throughout. And yeah, exciting.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Yes, so we're going to be presenting for a little bit. We're going to have some time at the end for questions, but as we go throughout, if you have any questions, as Melissa said, just pop them into the chat and we will try and address as many as possible, ideally all of them if we can within the time frame. So the first thing that I want to say about cover letters, a couple of introductory points. So we get a lot of questions from people, how long should a cover letter be? Do I really need to write one? Will the employer read it? What are they looking for? How does it differ from a CV? And all these type of questions which come up. So we're going to try and cover all those points today. But I just want to say from the start that there isn't one right way to present or write a cover letter. Okay, so it's not that everybody is going to put together the cover letters in the same way and that's what's going to get you to the next stage of the process. It's more about thinking about the type of content you want to include and how you generally want to lay it out, which we will be covering, rather than exactly how it looks. So in the same way that there's no one definitive answer as to how to write a CV, it's the same principle with cover letters as well. What I would say, however, is that the purpose of the CV and the cover letter together is to get you to the next stage of the process, which usually will be an interview. And in order to do that, you want to make sure that your cover letter and CV match the job that you are going for as closely as possible. So that involves various techniques in terms of changing and adapting your cover letter, which we will discuss as well. The other thing to say is that employers who recruit using a CV and cover letter tend to be smaller employers. Not always, but quite a lot of the time they will be smaller employers as opposed to larger employers who will use an application form instead. So really the benefit of the cover letter to you is that you get a chance to talk about your story and put some context and a little bit of a personal narrative as well into your application too. So those are some general principles I think I would suggest that you try and keep in mind as we go through the session this morning, and hopefully take away with you today as well, whatever type of applications you are making. Okay, so Richard, do we want to start sharing the screen? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, we can go to slide, next slide, please. Okay, so the general points that I've just made, hopefully we can cover a little bit more in depth now in sort of what is the point of a cover letter. People often ask us this question, why should I write one? Will it actually be read? Really, do I need it? And what is the point of this? So I'll give you a few pointers to start with, which will come up now on the next slide. And the first thing that I would say is that a cover letter is another opportunity for you to tell the employer that you can do the job they're recruiting for and that you're interested in that job. Now, a cover letter and a CV are not duplicates of each other. So they're not exactly the same thing. They're written in a different style. The cover letter will usually be more conversational. However, you are going to be talking about similar themes in your CV and in your cover letter, because both documents you want to use to show your match with the job that you are applying for. So, for example, if the employer has told you they're asking for customer service skills or IT skills, or someone who has experience in project management, we would expect to see those points covered both in your CV and in your cover letter as well. But maybe the style of writing is going to be slightly different. So at the end, what we want is two documents which are both focused on the job you're going for, which will complement each other and hopefully get you over the line to the next stage of the process. Okay, now, CV is quite a formal document. Okay, a cover letter, as I said, is a little bit more conversational. The style of writing is different. It's in the first person. Quite often CVs will be in the third person. Okay, and it generally gives you the opportunity to tell your story and create a coherent narrative that the employer will understand why you're applying for this job and why you're interested in it. Now, the second point you see there, this is particularly helpful if you are, for example, changing from one career area to another. Okay, and you want to just try and give a little bit of an explanation as to why you are doing that. Or if somebody's coming back from a career break, they might want to talk about that. You know, I've been on career break for a number of years, and that time I've been volunteering doing XYZ, or I've taken a course in this, and now I'm looking to find a job in this area, so I'm applying for this job. Okay, or my experience to date has been in XYZ. I've built up these transferable skills, which I now want to use in this. Okay, so a little bit of a context, a little bit of an explanation to somebody who doesn't know really who you are usually or anything about you. You can bring a bit of a personal narrative into that as well via the cover letter, which you can't do with the CV. So it adds that extra element and dimension there as well. Okay. Another thing that you could do, which again, not really on CV, is to explain why you're interested in the company and the organization in the employer. Okay, so telling them why you're interested in them, what you like about what they do, if they're a charity, what you like about their work, if they're a company, maybe what you like about their projects, or how you know, you've had some previous interaction with similar clients, or anything like that, which would align yourself with the organization and the company. And that they would see from what you've written that you've actually made an effort to talk about them and you're particularly interested in their job, rather than sending a generic cover letter to every job application that you make, which is the final point that you see there. So I would say with your cover letter, what you want to get out of it is demonstrating your capability to do the job, demonstrating your interest in the job and the company and organization, and for them to see that this is a personalized cover letter that you've put together specially for them. Okay, sorry, Richard, I need to move on now. Okay, a few do's and don'ts now for cover letters, and we're going to show a couple of examples of actual cover letters soon. I think these points will be brought out there sort of in practice, but just to go through them first, So first of all, as I've said, you want to tailor your cover letter to the role being applied for. So it doesn't work for you to send the same cover letter for every job, because it's not showing a close match or particular interest in that role. So if you're doing that and you said, is there a point in me sending this cover letter? I'd say, well, I don't actually think it's going to add that much to your application. But the more specific you can make it and targeted, the more effective it's going to be. Okay. Again, conveying to the employer, you're interested in them, you're interested in the role, and that you have the skills and capability to do the job. So on that point, you need to be familiar with what is being requested by an employer. What is in the person's specification? What are the main skills that you need? What experience do you need to be able to do this job well? And try and bring out a few of those points with some evidence and examples, so they can almost read it and say, yeah, these are the type of skills and experience that we want. We want to meet this person. That's what you want to get to with your cover letter and CV. You will hopefully get yourself the job when you get to the interview stage. Not too long, I would say maybe 2/3 of a page, maybe up to 1 page, not longer than a page, unless they tell you that it should be, 2 pages or whatever instructions they give you. Obviously, you want to go with those, but these are just some general principles. Often it's the quality that you put in rather than the length of the actual cover letter. So easy to read, spaced nicely, easy on the eye, not a tiny little font to squeeze it all onto 1 page, not multiple different fonts. So just, keeping it clear, nice, punchy, and using words and terminology that would resonate with them in line with what they've put onto the job description. Okay, same font and style I've mentioned. And a lot of these things are things that you can easily get right. So you just want to get them right. It's again about making a good first impression in the way that you're presenting yourself on paper at this stage. That's why those things are important. And including a cover letter, even if it's not specifically requested. I think I just saw a question pop up about that. We would normally say, unless the employer specifically says, please send CV only, then send CV only. But in other cases, if it's not stated, a short cover letter can help you for all the reasons that I've just said. So if you want to explain to them why you're interested in the job, why you're interested in them, a little bit more about yourself, that can really add value, but only if you do it in this way that's targeted to the job and how you will match with them. So I would add something there, not too long, but still to include it. So that's what you should do. What you shouldn't do is making your cover very long and irrelevant. So you want to always have your mind on, what is this job? What will the employer want to see? They don't have a lot of time to read this. If they do read it, are they going to be able to find the relevant points quickly? Okay, so keeping your eye on the ball with that. Same as the CV. You don't need to talk about everything you've ever done in your life. It just has to be things that are going to be of interest to the employer and match up with the job. When you're talking about your interest in the organization, you want to talk about what you're interested in, how you align with them, rather than factual information about their own company. So to say things like, your company is one of the top 10 businesses doing X in the world, or your organization does this, this, and this, they already know this information. What they want to know is how you're going to fit in and why you're interested. So we need a personal alignment rather than just factual information about the employer. And being careful again about your spelling, your grammar. This is the same thing as the font and the style. Many times we do see cover letters which have these type of mistakes, and it's understandable because you probably look at it many, many times, and once you've read something many times, you miss things. So this is why it's good to get a pair of fresh eyes on your documents, but really you want to get these things right. Some employers, if they see a mistake, they won't even read the application. It could be a great application, but they'll just throw it in the bin. Others will still be happy to read it, but it is something which is often noted. So just keep these points in mind when you're putting together your cover letter and your applications. Let's see. Okay, I think now I'm going to hand over to Richard, who's actually going to look at all these points we've made in the context of an actual job and applying for that job using the cover letter.
Thanks, Yael. Hello again, everyone. So the first thing, before we actually look at a couple of examples of cover letters, what we thought we'd do to be helpful for this workshop would be to have an actual job advert that we can refer to. And actually the examples of the cover letters you're going to see, so we're going to show you a good one and a bad one, are going to be related to this specific job advert. Now, obviously, you're not all going to be, the job advert is for the position of hotel receptionist. Now, obviously, you're not all going to be applying for those jobs, but we just thought we'd give it as an example to sort of exemplify the points that we're trying to make about a bad cover letter and a good cover letter. So hopefully you'll be able to use the same principles when you're next writing a cover letter. So this is just I think it's a real job description that we found on the internet. Now you won't always get a detailed job description like this. In fact, sometimes you'll get it in much more detail, but occasionally you'll get a lot less detail. It will either be a job advert, as I'm sure a lot of you that are looking regularly will know, sometimes you get a job description, a person specification. Sometimes it will literally just be a few lines saying that we're looking for a hotel receptionist and a couple of lines about the job. The main thing you want to do when you've got your job advert or job description is to look through it in detail and pick out the main points that you think the organisation is looking for. And if it is just a couple of lines, then do a bit of research, go online, Google that particular job advert, Google that particular job and look at other similar jobs so that you really get a sense of what these various employers are looking for. Because, you know, usually if one hotel is looking for a receptionist, it's going to be a similar set of skills to if another hotel is looking for a receptionist. So the main, when I look at this job description, the main points that come out here is it's a luxury hotel, so they're looking for people with either experience or capabilities in the luxury world. They're looking for obviously good customer service skills. They're looking for people with, if you read through, they need to have an idea of computer systems, whether it's Microsoft Office or sort of an internal database. They're not looking for anything fancy. They're not looking for someone with a high level of IT skills, but they are looking for someone that sort of knows their way around the computer. They're looking for people with, you know, that can answer queries, that can provide excellent customer service. These are the main kind of themes that you see when you're looking through that, through the description. So we're going to go on to examples of cover letters. I'm going to start with a bad one, okay? So when you look at this cover letter, it's not all bad. There are quite a few good points about it. We've seen much worse, let's put it that way. But immediately when you start reading it, you see a mistake. So the very first line there, I want to apply hotel receptionist at Hotel X. So immediately there's a mistake. You know the expression, you only get one chance to make a first impression. Well, the first impression there is pretty bad because they've either had a typo, they've written it quickly, or they've missed out a couple of words there. I want to apply should be for the position of, or words to that effect. When you look through the first main paragraph, needs to be punchy. It needs to very quickly get across the message that you're the right person for the job. I'm sure you've probably heard this before. An employer on average spends about 10 seconds reading a CV. It's similar with the cover letter. You want to very, very quickly get across the message that you're the right person for the job. And if you start off well, they're much more likely to carry on reading. So this one starts off, after A-levels, when I was 18, I worked for a mechanic. So not only is it not relevant or current, you know, this person's probably in their mid to late 20s. So not only is it not current or relevant, it's talking about a profession completely different to customer service. So a mechanic obviously is very little to do with it. So immediately they've kind of, the employer's reading it and wondering, why are you telling me this? Why do I need to know this? And then if you read on, you know, it talks about a degree in geography, not really very relevant. And arguably they start to get a little bit more relevant when they say that they got a job working for the university where they stayed for 6 years. I suppose at least they're committed, they're loyal because they stayed for that long. But ultimately it's really irrelevant. When we come on to look at the good cover letter in a moment, you'll see how you can do this in a really effective way. There's some good stuff in the next paragraph. It could be written better. It could be written a bit more professionally, but there are a few good things. But the real problem I have with this paragraph is the first sentence. I haven't actually worked as a receptionist in a hotel before. It's a really bad thing to say. It's basically telling them that I've never done this job before, and the employer's going to think, well, if I've got other CVs and cover letters for people that have done it before, then I'll just leave this client and go on to this candidate and go on to the next one. So it's a really bad thing to start off with. But like I say, there's some other good things in this paragraph. It's not all bad. But when you see a long paragraph like this, it's not the most ideal thing to have, because employers might have 20 or 30 CVs and cover letters. You don't want to bore them with quite a long paragraph. You want to have punchy, as you see in the next good example, bullet points that really get to the point as to why you're suitable for the role, rather than them having to read through a long paragraph. So that's not particularly a good thing to have either. The way it ends isn't great as well. Please call me on Tuesday. Now, I know when the candidate's thinking, maybe they're working Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and they think it's a good idea to tell them to call on Tuesday. But the candidate, by writing that, is making it all about them and not about the employer, not about the hotel. Really, they shouldn't say that, because I'm sure if they really want the job and the employer calls on a Monday or a Wednesday, that at their first available break, if they're working throughout the day, they can obviously call them back. And we get breaks regularly throughout the day in the working world. So there's no reason to put that. It's quite demanding and doesn't really give a good impression to the employer. So that's a bad cover letter. I'm going to move on to a good cover letter.
Richard, just a quick question that came through from the previous cover letter, the bad cover letter. Someone's noticed actually that were quite a few different fonts used. In terms of formatting, is that something that we want to avoid, using 3 different fonts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I just missed it in my explanation, but yeah, the font changes in the first paragraph. It's one font, and then it goes on to a different font in the second paragraph. Yeah, these are, Yael mentioned that earlier. This is a real no-no. It just doesn't look professional, does it? If you've got that. So yeah, definitely good point. Right, good cover letter. We at Work Avenue, we have a sort of a standard template that we recommend. Now, as Yael mentioned earlier, there's no right or wrong way to write a cover letter. However, we try and stick to this method, as we know it's proven, it's tried and tested, and it works. So the method we suggest doing is, obviously you start off by saying, I'm very interested in applying blah, 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 which, by the way, in the bad cover letter, you might have noticed it just started with, I want to apply for the position. We always say, be positive and enthusiastic the whole way through the CV and cover letter. So rather than I want to, here we've got I'm very interested. It just shows more enthusiasm. The second, or rather the main paragraph that starts, I have significant experience, is kind of like your elevator pitch. For any of you have heard of an elevator pitch, it's basically to give you a very quick idea of what it is. imagine you got into an elevator with someone, and by the time you've got with that person to the floor that you're getting to, you've got, let's say, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to sell yourself to that person. So the first paragraph here should almost be enough on its own, and it should sell you in the context of the job. Okay, so if you can remember from the bad cover letter, it said, when I was 18, I started working as a mechanic, which is completely off topic, completely irrelevant. Whereas this one, we get straight to the point. So even though this person hasn't worked as a receptionist, a hotel receptionist before, we get straight to the point. I have significant experience within customer service and administration positions. Now, if the employer is thinking, we want someone with a lot of good customer service experience that's professional, that can use a computer, that's got good IT skills, then immediately you've got off on the right footing. You've told them that you're right for the job, all in that very first sentence. And then obviously it goes on and says what experience you've got. You might remember from the bad cover letter that the same thing was said as we move through the cover letter, that this person's got the experience. But in this one, we categorize it as front of house assistant experience at a university. In the bad cover letter, we didn't put it quite so well. We just sort of said experience talking to students, which obviously doesn't come across as well and isn't professional enough. So the first paragraph is like your elevator pitch, and it gives what the person did when they wrote this was they went through the job description and they basically came out with the main points. So you can see at the end of the paragraph, we've got dealing with inquiries. I've got experience with dealing with inquiries in person, over the phone and by email, booking in clients, directing them accordingly, updating databases, handling complaints and taking payments. Those were all pretty much the main points from the job description that we just looked at. So immediately the clients basically the candidates basically telling them, I can do what you're looking for. Now, if you tell the employer that, it's very hard for them to say to go away thinking you're not suitable for the role. So it really, if you take one main thing away from this webinar today, if you can tell the employer that you've got exactly the skills and experience that they're looking for, it's going to be very hard for them to say that you're not suitable for the role. So that's exactly what you can see here in this good cover letter. And then we go through and we've got some really punchy bullet points, basically, again, going into more detail and saying, explaining that this person's got the experience for it. And then as we come to the end, you can see the last paragraph, as Yael was saying earlier, you need to explain to the employer why you've specifically applied for this job and at this organization within this industry. And the person's done that really well. They've said they're enthusiastic about working as a receptionist in a hotel. They've massaged their ego a bit by saying, I really want to work for you because you've got a great reputation within the industry. I love your hotel. I would love to work for a luxury brand. So it's really cleverly written to make the employer feel special, to make the employer feel like this person really wants to be part of our team. So I think for those reasons, I think this is a much better cover letter than the one before. And obviously all the fonts the same, the font size is the same, everything kind of fits in sync with each other on this one. Okay, so that was the good and bad cover letter. I'm going to come on now to talk about adapting your cover letter for different jobs. Now, if you're applying for, let's say, lots of other, we'll stick on the example of the receptionist. So if you're applying for lots of other receptionist roles, then you don't have to massively change your cover letter. You don't have to start from scratch and write a brand new one for every job that you're applying for, because a lot of the principles are going to be the same. Okay, so actually, once you've written one cover letter, there shouldn't be a huge amount that you need to do to apply for another job and write another one. But you do definitely need to think about how it's written. Does it make sense? Have I adapted it enough to make the employer feel special and to make to make the employer feel like that. I know maybe it's a bit cheesy or a bit cliched, but you want the employer to feel like they're the only company you've ever wanted to work for, and that that they're the only company you're applying to. I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but the more you can do that, the more special you can make them feel, the more likely it is they're going to offer you an interview and be impressed by you. Okay, so you don't need to change it massively. If you're applying for another receptionist role, most of it's the same. Obviously, the bit about why you want to work for the organisation will be different because it's a different hotel or a different organisation. The bits where you match your skills and experience to the job are probably going to be mostly the same, but there might be a few different bits. So you need to be mindful of that. If there's a specific skill that the newer employer is looking for, then you need to change it a little bit. You need to add in those extra skills to make them know that you can do what they're looking for, if it's slightly different to the other role. Now, if you're applying for a completely different job, so, we're talking about receptionists here, but let's say that person wants to apply for a job as, I don't know, an operations assistant. Okay, so in other words, there's much less emphasis on customer service and much more emphasis on being able to provide operations support and administration and office support. Then obviously you need to adapt it accordingly. You need to make sure that you put much more about that, and obviously less, if anything, nothing about the customer service side of things. If in the job advert or the job description, there's nothing mentioned about it. You really have to go by the job description, okay? So what you might find is if you're applying for, let's say, 2 or 3 different types of job, you might have 2 or 3 different types of template that you then adapt for each job that you're applying for. So those, I think, are the main things to consider when adapting your cover letter for different jobs. I don't know, were there any questions about this bit, Melissa? Or no? Okay. So I'm going to talk briefly before we finish and take questions from people. I'm going to talk briefly about the speculative cover letter. For any of you that don't know what the speculative cover letter is, it's when a job doesn't exist. So maybe you want to work at a specific company, you've been thinking about them for a while, and but there's not a job advertised there. Then you can actually still write to that organisation. The cover letter will be similar, very similar to a usual cover letter, but obviously it'll be worded slightly differently. So you're not saying I'm excited about applying for the role of. You're saying I would like to inquire as to whether there's any vacancies in this area, or I'd like to inquire about possible job opportunities coming up in your organisation. Now, speculative cover letters work best when they're done on volume. If you send off 1 or 2, you're very unlikely to hear back from the employer. But if you send off loads, like 50, then there's every chance that 1 or 2 will come back to you saying, actually, we are thinking of hiring in a few days, weeks, months. Thank you very much. Would you like to have a chat? Are you free to have a chat? So it is very much a volume thing, but it's a very good strategy to have. If, for example, you've been applying for a few roles at, let's say, I'll give a perfect example. Let's say you're applying for a receptionist or administrator at a doctor's surgery. You've seen a couple of jobs advertised, you've applied for them, maybe you've had an interview, but you haven't got a job yet. Now, we all know that, in a 3 or 5 mile radius of anyone's house, there's probably hundreds of doctor's surgeries. So you could actually write a speculative letter. Obviously, it needs to go with the CV, and send that CV and speculative letter off to all of those doctor's surgeries in your area. Because there's every chance that 1 or 2 of them are short-staffed and maybe looking for people and might be able to get you in for either a chat or a phone call or an interview. So it's a really, really good idea to do. If you want more advice on that, then I think book an appointment with an advisor, myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll talk through it all with you. but it does usually require follow-up. So that really the best way to do it is to get the company's details, to write your CV, write your speculative letter, send them off to all of them, and then follow up maybe by a phone call or a follow-up email, let's say a week later. Okay, well, that's, I think, the end of our bit of the webinar, explaining everything to you. I hope it was really useful, and I'd like to open up now for anyone, for any questions for myself or Yael.
I have a question, Richard. In regards to the previous hotel receptionist job, for example, if they've not got the set essential experience of, let's say, being a receptionist in the past, but they still think that their transferable skills are really good for the role and they think that they can do the job really well, how would they best present their transferable skills on that kind of cover letter? Because do you feel that the employer might not look at the CV if it was an essential requirement, or the cover letter, sorry?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's partially answered from the good cover letter that we looked at, partially. So I'm just going to quickly go back to it. I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. Yeah, so actually, you might remember, you might remember even from the bad cover letter that this person hasn't actually worked as a receptionist in a hotel before. You never want to say that, obviously, as I said earlier, but I suppose you just need to think of the cleverest way to demonstrate that you've got the skills that they're looking for. Most people, if they've worked, have had some customer service experience, whether it's clients coming into the office. So even if you work as an administrator and you're now looking for a customer service or receptionist role, you will have at some point probably talked to a client over the phone, or maybe someone came into the office sometime. So you can normally find some way of relating the experience that they're looking for to something that you've done in the past. And actually, Yael will tell you, she runs a whole workshop on transferable skills. We get a lot of clients coming to us that have minimal experience. Either they're starting out in life, or maybe they've had quite a long career break for bringing up a family. And actually, they might not have that much work experience. But usually, when you really think about it and you really drill down into what a person has done, you can normally find the transferable skills. So you might not actually be able to say in the cover letter that you've done what the employer is looking for, but you can usually find a clever way of describing that the skills that you've got either from previous jobs, or from being a parent, or from volunteering or something, are usually a match for what the employer is looking for.
Sorry, Richard. I just wanted to add something, which is, in addition to that point, a bit more of a contextual point, is that you never know really who else is applying for a job. So that's always going to be a factor which you don't know about. So there may be people who match more of the job, there may be people who match less of the job. So you need to make a sort of common sense judgment in your mind when you're looking at the role. How much of this do you feel you have done, or do you feel that you could do? And are you able to present that in this type of context of a CV, of a cover letter, in a way that would provide a compelling argument to the employer that they should interview and meet you for the job? In many cases, you're not going to get many applicants, or that many applicants, who meet 100% of the criteria that the employers ask for, especially if it's a list of 20, 30 things on there. So it's just making a judgment about that. And the other thing is it also depends on the job market. Now, the job market now is very buoyant, and there are a lot of different jobs around, which means it's a bit more of an applicant's market. So employers would be more open to considering applicants with transferable skills in a buoyant job market. When the job market is tight and there's fewer jobs around, then naturally people who have the experience are going to go to the top of the list, as opposed to people who are applying on transferable skills normally. Not always, we can't say anything for sure, but your chances of applying for a job which you don't have experience in but that you would like to do are going to be better, obviously in an open job market as we are in now. And then it's just a question of how you're going to present that on paper, which is something that obviously we can advise and help on as well.
Great. We've got another question for you guys. Someone wants to know how best to address their cover letter if they don't know who they're writing to, as well as signing it off. Should it be yours sincerely, yours faithfully, kind regards, best wishes?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go for it.
So it's more about like who they're addressing it to and then how they're supposed to sign off.
Yeah, sure. So actually, in this one that we're looking at on the screen now, it's dear sir or madam. But it is really great if you do know the person that you're writing to. I remember many years ago a client that I was working with, that each time she applied for a job, she used to call up the company and just ask, who do I address the CV and the cover letter to? And I thought it was actually a really good tactic to use. And if you're lucky enough to actually get on the phone with that person, you can actually have a very quick chat with them, as long as you don't, spend too long and disrupt their working day. But then it gives you an opportunity to say, dear Mrs. Smith, it was great to chat to you on the phone earlier, and then start your cover letter. So that actually could be a good thing. If you can get the person's name, if you go onto LinkedIn, if you go onto the company, let's say it's a small company and there's only one person dealing with recruitment, then it's almost certainly going to be them, and you can actually write to that person specifically. So if you can get the person's name, great. Otherwise, I suppose dear sir, madam would probably be. I don't particularly like to whom it may concern. I don't know what you think. Yeah, I'm not particularly keen.
No, I also don't like it. It makes it even more impersonal, I think. And the thing with these things is you would want to try and personalize it as much as you can. So yes, I agree.
And generally speaking, at the bottom, we sort of say, I know things generally as the years go on are becoming less and less formal, but generally speaking, it is a letter. So usually at the bottom, you'd write yours faithfully or yours sincerely. Rather than just sort of, I think it's fine to actually say kind regards, especially if you've chatted to them, but generally speaking, yours sincerely or yours faithfully if it's a professional company.
Great. We actually have a candidate here who's looking to apply to a big accountancy firm, and they're wondering how important writing a cover letter actually is. Will the employer look at it if it's such a big accountancy firm?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Elle touched upon this right at the start. Our advice, and this has never changed in all the years I've been doing this, is unless they specifically say in big capital letters, do not include a cover letter, which you do see sometimes. I would always advise you including a cover letter, as long as it's good, as long as it looks really slick, looks smart, it's punchy, it's the right length, it's to the point, etc. Then I would always include a cover letter, because what you're doing is, if you can imagine, if let's say 30 people apply for the job, okay, let's say 15 of them just send the CV and the other 15 send a CV and a cover letter. The employer is going to think that the people that have gone to the trouble of actually writing, they've spent half an hour writing a cover letter. The employer is going to be much more impressed with those people. Anyone could send off a CV. It can be done in a minute these days. You've got it saved on your computer. You can just whiz off the CV as quick as anything. But not everyone will take half an hour to properly write a cover letter. The employer is going to be much more impressed with that. They're going to think that person's much more keen, much more interested, and is committed to applying for that type of job.
Yeah, I think the question of whether they read it, I agree with everything Richard said, is we never know the answer to that. How much of the CV are they going to read? How much of the cover letter? You don't know. Some of them might read it, they might not, they might scan through it. But from an applicant's perspective, you need to prepare your application, obviously, as if it will be read. But the reason why Richard emphasised on the top paragraph of the cover letter should really be very punchy, and we say the same for the CV, is if they're only going to read the first part, then you want them to at least grasp from that why you're applying, why you're interested, and why you would be a relevant person for them. Also, I can see on the chat from earlier, there was a question about when applying to a big employer, is a cover letter not necessary. I think that's may have come from the point that I mentioned, that a lot of larger employers use application forms rather than CVs and cover letters, which is a general point, not an absolute rule. I would say you want to follow whatever the instructions are you have from the employer. So if they ask you for a CV and cover letter, obviously you want to send it. If they don't ask for a cover letter, as Richard just mentioned, you'd still want to send it. If instead they've asked for an application form, that usually has an area for a personal statement, which has some similarities to the cover letter, but also is a little bit different, a little bit more detailed as well. So you need to go with the application process for the particular job that you're going for.
I have a question. The advert asks for experience working in a luxury hotel, and this cover letter doesn't say anything about that. It's the first thing in the advert, and I'm wondering that although it's good to mention you've got transferable skills, if you're dealing in a luxury hotel, you're going to be dealing with people who don't go do supermarket shopping. You're going to be dealing with people who do a lot of business travel, luxury holidays, and because you haven't said in the letter, because the letter doesn't say, I have experience, I have worked in the hotel industry, I'm just wondering if that wouldn't rule people out from looking at this CV.
I'm happy to answer that if you want.
Yeah.
The thing is, Jonathan, I wanted to give a real life example here. Okay, if someone's got 5 years experience working in a luxury hotel, there's an argument that you possibly don't even need a cover letter. As soon as the employer sees that, they're going to be impressed, and they're almost certainly going to offer them an interview. But the fact that this person had worked in Asda and had worked as front of house at a university, okay, you know, that's much more realistic for a lot of the clients that we see at Work Avenue. And that's possibly why they come to us for help, because they're looking for a job often that they haven't done before. So you're right. It says, you know, luxury hotel, they're looking for people with experience working in there. But what we're saying is you have to create the best possible CV and cover letter. Obviously, specifically today, we're talking about the cover letter, even though this candidate hasn't worked in a luxury hotel before. So you have to create the best, give yourself the best chance of at least getting an interview. And as Yael said, the jobs market's very buoyant at the moment. So there's certainly more jobs than there are applicants. Okay, so they are quite likely, if someone can demonstrate well enough that they've got all the skills and experience that the employer is looking for, there's every chance, especially in this job market, that they're going to get an interview. So you're right, this person doesn't have experience working in luxury hotel, but that definitely doesn't mean that they're not going to get an interview. And actually, the first thing that we say in this cover letter is a great deal of experience working in customer service. We mentioned front of house. That is exactly this sort of experience that's
I get that.
To work in a hotel. Yeah,
I get that.
Great. We have a question, another one that's just come through. This person asked that if they've been given just an email to send their application, they've not been told if like an online application form to fill in or anything, do they put their cover letter as their email rather than attaching it to their email? Or do they write up like a general email to this person and attach their CV and cover letter?
I would say that there's no one right answer on that. I've seen both, and I don't think from what I've seen working with employers that there's any particular one answer and etiquette to that. So you either can send your cover letter as an attachment to the email if you want. So you'll do it on a Word document, you'll attach it, or you can do it as the body of the email. So you'll write dear whoever, and then you'll write your whatever you want to write, as we've just discussed in there, and then sort of sign off at the end and say that your CV is attached. So you can go either way with this. I think anyway you want to put something in the email, even if your cover letter is an attachment. So you'd want to say, you know, I'm applying for this role, please see attach this. Okay, so not a blank email that I've sometimes seen before with 2 attachments. But aside from that, you can choose either way. You might think about, is the employer the type of employer who is a very formal traditional employer, so they might expect it as a sort of formalized letter as an attachment, or are they a smaller startup business where everything is generally a little bit more informal, so an email would be fine. But I don't think there's one answer. I think it depends on the situation, what you want to do.
Great. We've got a creative client here for you, and they've been asked to send off some examples of work alongside their application, and their portfolio is quite large, so too large to include an attachment. Should they include it in their cover letter as a link?
Yes, I think if depending on what type, we work with lots of clients, for example, graphic design, interior design, all those type of things with a portfolio. And I actually think you can either have a link to it. So let's say you've got a website with all of your portfolio on it, much better to attach a link to it. Or if you've got a PDF, then you could maybe attach a Dropbox link to where that PDF is in your Dropbox folder. So something like that's probably best. Or failing all of that, you could always reduce the size of your file, so to minimize the size of it and then send it as an attachment. But I slightly prefer, sometimes when you send an attachment, it goes into someone's junk folder because if it's a large attachment, or they think it might be malicious or have be spam. So generally speaking, yeah, a link, or link to a website, or a link to a PDF is probably best.
Cool. Also, someone's actually made a connection with an employer through networking, and they were wondering if they should include a cover letter as like a kind of introduction to themselves along with their CV.
Yeah, I mean, with networking, so I probably want to find out a bit more about, about exactly what you mean. But generally speaking, with networking, strike up a conversation first, assess whether it's likely, if they're an employer and you would like to work at that company, start by having a conversation with them first. And then maybe you could ask, would it be okay to send across my CV? Maybe they haven't got a job at the moment, but can I send across my CV? And with that CV, yes, you would definitely include a cover letter. It's almost like the speculative letter that we were talking about earlier, because they might not necessarily have a job. Really sort of explaining why you'd love to work for that company, that industry, why you'd be a good match for that organization and that potential role. So yeah, I would definitely include a cover letter and CV. But first of all, you want to establish a bit of rapport, get a bit of rapport going with the person you're networking with first, I think, before you wouldn't just send off a CV and cover letter without having properly talked to the person first, is kind of what I mean.
I agree, and it's the context. Then if you're going to send it to them afterwards, obviously you're going to refer to your previous conversations and not do it as if you're applying cold, which is sort of what we've shown. On that note, I know we're almost out of time, but I just saw the question about how many people find their jobs by CV as opposed to networking, because we were on that subject anyway. We can't give a definitive answer to that question, exactly how many in numbers, but what I would say is a significant number of jobs that people will find will have an element of networking attached to them. And it's always been a very, very effective way of job searching, of getting more information, of finding work. So if you are looking for work, definitely speaking to people, definitely networking, making connections with people is something that will hopefully help to sort of narrow the odds in your favor of finding your next role. And if you have networked with somebody and they say to you, yes, you had a good conversation, I'm going to need your CV and cover letter just to go through the process, okay, just send it to me, almost just as a formality, okay, but we're going to invite you for an interview anyway. Then this whole thought around how exactly you're going to structure it and exactly the wording you're going to use all becomes a bit less significant because you already have that warm lead. So if you can get that warm lead, and this is especially important with the questions that were asked about changing careers, returning to work. If you know people, you're speaking to them, they already understand the context, then you're one step ahead of the game already when you come to send your CV. So I say networking, very important and effective. I can't give the specific numbers of how many people are finding jobs, but in our experience, a lot. I would say maybe 70% have an element of networking attached. Okay. Is there any last question, 30-second question from anybody? Or anything one would like to say?
I've got no more questions for you guys, but I've also included a link to our website and a contact number. Also, in the slides that we'll be sending out, we've also got Yael and Richard's email there if you'd like to reach out to them individually too.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Yes, I was about to say, all of you, you know where we are. If anyone wants any further meetings, one-to-one meetings with our advisors, to attend any of our workshops, for us to review any of your applications, to apply for any jobs on our jobs board, anything to do with this, please feel free to be in touch with us, contact us, and obviously we will be very happy to help you with that. So thank you everybody for joining today. We hope you found this helpful, and good luck to all of you with your applications and with your job search going forward. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All the best, everyone.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.